All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. Since the public appearances had appeared at 9:45 on the agenda, I'm told that we've had a couple of other people that might want to address the board. Commissioner Lipke, are they here yet? Or?
Yes, Steve Comerford.
Steve, would you like to come forward? Give us your name and address. You have 3 minutes to address the board. It's our standard procedure.
I'm a former teacher, so that's tough to do. Steve Comerford, New Ulm, Minnesota. I'm an independent agricultural and environmental consultant. I'm in that phase down period here, though, at the end. But that issue on the road, I indicated this to some of my clients about 20, 25 years ago that this is only going to get worse. It's because of the nature of the properties, the natural processes of nature, and that as we add these quote conservation acreage that are not managed, we have a lot less evapotranspiration than we do on cropland or forest land. That's just the nature of the beast. Prairies use a lot less water. They're adapted to those conditions than we have in the forested areas. And that water is going to rise as we put more land into these unmanaged, where we're not seeing the crop removed and therefore the additional moisture usage that occurs, such as if it was hayed on a regular basis. Just at a seminar last Friday of a project that was funded, just completed, a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. They looked at this in terms of what drives flow. Precipitation is the major driver, and then the next factor is the land cover. Corn and soybean acreage, or acreage that would be hayed on a regular basis, the plants removed, use a lot of water. They use much more than native prairie, and especially native prairies that would be matted over. Just think about it from the standpoint of what happens what did happen back when in the Dakotas when we had non-cropped acres, fallowed acres. We ended up having downslope movement internally of that water, sometimes tens of miles away, that created these seepage areas and accumulations, what they call black alkali. That will continue, and ultimately that water is going to rise with the acreage around there. A good example of that is right near New Ulm, just south of New Ulm, about a mile on Highway 15, south of the hilltop. There is an area that was taken out of production. Some of it was original pasture, but it's non-cropped, non-managed right now. That is overflowed, and that's cutting a ravine through the field that's out there. And that happened about 4 or 5 years ago when we had extra moisture. It's happening right now, and it's been flowing ever since we've had that rain. So that's going to happen. It's not going to go away, but unmanaged in this seminar, unmanaged prairies, the indications with these Landsat estimates of evapotranspiration, they're down about 60% of what you'd have with corn and soybeans. So I don't know, I'm trying to cram them in there. If you have some questions, I would be happy. But the fact that we're increasing the amount of non-crop land, that's increasing this downflow pressure. The reality is, my background in soils, when we tile, we increase evapotranspiration. So when we increase the lateral tiles, we increase water usage. That actually reduces the amount of flow down. Now, the original, you might circuit that process initially when you just have the few mains going in there. But as you add lateral tiles, you're going to increase more water usage. But rainfall, this is the driver, and then the less water usage by the plants in that in that watershed are going to drive this process into the future.
Thank you for the lesson. Appreciate it.
Comment, Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner.
I don't know, do you know what percentage of that watershed is the DNR owns and has grass in it? It's a pretty good percentage.
I looked at some aerial photos for this agri-surety program that I have, and I don't know the exact boundaries, but there's a lot more than there was
Oh, certainly.
going back 25 years, 30 years ago.
Thank you.
Any other comments for the board? We'll take public appearances. I know many of you were here for County Road 12. But seeing none, we will move along to property services. Mandy Landcamera is here. How do you want to handle your, we're not at 10 o'clock yet, but take a couple of your items and then we can go to the public hearing, or however you'd like to do that.
Sure, that sounds good.
Good morning.
Good morning. The item that we can discuss now is a request made to the Planning and Zoning Commission dating back to November of 2017. It was made by Mary Kamick regarding a antique and oddities text amendment to the Conservancy zoning district. At the November hearing, she made the formal request, but to back up to provide some additional background with this request, I think it would be very helpful. In September, our office received a complaint regarding some dust and some signs located out on Highway 169, State Road, County 22, and then also onto a township road. Staff investigated and did find that there was an antique oddities type store operating out in a very small acreage adjacent to a rural residential subdivision. We've sent out an initial letter indicating that there was some violations with the ordinance, and did have a couple of meetings both with Mary Kamick and Julie Leonard regarding the operation of the business. One of the suggestions we provided was to request a text amendment to the zoning ordinance. And so they did, and that was at that November hearing, and the request was to amend the Conservancy zoning district to allow the use of a antique and oddities type store business. So that request was made in November. We did not have a hearing in December, nor in January. And during that time, staff did a lot of investigation. We had about 28 responses back from both within our District E of the Planning and Zoning Association, and then about 19 other responses from adjacent other counties within the state. So a total about 28 responses overall. A lot of them came from Le Sueur and Waseca counties, and we were able to have very good conversations with them. Some of the items that were discussed both at the February and most recently the May meeting were just in regard to the operation or the type of businesses and the dust control, and specifically township road use. In this particular location, it is on a somewhat 90-degree turn in a very narrow township road, and that was brought to the attention as far as how we're going to handle dust control and specifically parking with it. There was mention of an accident that occurred last fall. There's no reason to believe that the accident and the operation of the business at that time had anything to do with it. There's no indication at all with it. And do want to mention that because that was some concern raised throughout our conversations. A couple of the items that were brought up both in May and then also in April is just how to address this request in regard to the comp plan planning process that we are currently undertaking. There was some minimal discussion with it, but ultimately the Planning and Zoning Advisory Commission recommended unanimous approval to move forward with the text amendment. As per planning principles, then we have the Board of Commissioners make the final decision on that. I do want to bring a couple items of concern, and the vote was a 6-0 with that, and the items again that we mentioned specifically was the comp plan process. We are about 3 months into it. We currently have the surveys available for public feedback, and we have got a pretty good response so far. It is still open and hoping to have additional responses coming back in. With that being said, though, there is some concern that if this process were to allow to continue and the ordinance is amended within the next, say, 6 to 8 months, I think there's some concern as, yes, it may be allowed as a conditional use within the Conservancy zoning district, but it's not going to accomplish what the Mary Kamick has requested. There are some concerned items out there specifically with this location and in general with the Conservancy zoning district. At our last meeting, staff did provide the Planning Commission with a map of all the areas zone conservancy, and also in relation to the rural subdivisions or R1 zoning districts and the number of houses within those specific areas. I have that map available if you're interested in seeing that. Just to get an idea of that traffic, typically they're not loud events, but there's a lot more traffic associated with these type of events, and they're coming and going at their typical 3 to 4 day sales with it. With that being said, I just want to make sure that that's out there. There is some concern with relation to the R1 zoning districts. And the other item I think that is going to be possibly more costly for the county to consider is that if this text amendment were allowed to go through, there has to be some serious consideration of how it's going to be addressed, the building code part of it. When structures are allowed to have the public enter it, by state building code, even though Nicollet County does not enforce the state building code, they still have to meet those codes. And we had a significant discussion yesterday at a meeting I attended that it is somewhat difficult because many of the rural counties do not have building code, and how do you address that? We're looking at just building construction, fire, electrical, plumbing, how are we going to deal with the septic system, and then American Disabilities Act. The county is required to enforce that, and staff does not feel comfortable, nor do we have the knowledge to enforce that type of act with it. So there are some options, as entering into a contract with a building official to review all the plans that come into our office and then also do the final inspections. And those costs will then be forwarded on to the applicant to pay for those with it. But those are just some issues that we have addressed or commented throughout this process, and I think the building code is a major concern. We're starting to see more interest of having structures built that the public are allowed to enter, and we have to make sure that the public safety is number one with that. That this text amendment is not going to address all the issues that Mary Kamek has requested. We know that they're with that specific location, just allowing it in the Conservancy District, it's not going to be something that can go ahead and start operating immediately. There are several other issues, and just a reminder that we are going through the comp plan process at this time. That's all.
So what is your recommendation based on the planning and zoning?
Staff has concerns about the request moving forward. I think, like I mentioned, those 3 items that we need to be aware of it, that the building code is a major issue. And not only is it this structure that we're talking about, but it's all future structures that are renovated or built to host these type of activities. And considering we are going through the comp plan process, this is a perfect opportunity to get feedback from the entire county, not just one individual.
If it would please the board, I'll ask Commissioner Drantle, who sits on the planning board, what are your thoughts with respect to this report?
Well, I think the thoughts of planning and zoning was, the request came from Mrs. Kamek and Mrs. Leonard, but we need to think about all of Nicollet County. And to keep that into perspective, my concerns were the comp plan, this building code thing we really didn't get into at the meeting. I guess I would prefer waiting until we had the comp plan done, because we could be doubling or tripling our workload here unnecessarily.
Any other comments from commissioners? Would you like to form a motion about that, or?
Sure.
We can at least discuss and.
Yeah, I would move that we would wait with this text amendment until we complete our comprehensive plan process.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second?
Is that a table then?
I would use the language that Commissioner Drano used, not table it.
Okay.
I'll second the motion.
Commissioner Kemp has seconded. Discussion?
Madam County Attorney, do we have any timeline exposures for not acting on the request that you were aware of?
No.
Okay.
Had there been any, and Commissioner Kemp brings up a good point, when it wasn't heard in December and January, were there cancellations because of weather, or what was that? Was that a different issue?
The December meeting, we did not have any public hearing items, and then
No.
January was canceled due to weather.
Right, so we don't have any issues with
I'm just
respect.
asking if that was an
Right.
issue at all that we needed to address.
So if this board moves on that motion, would that give you comfort in your office as the comp plan is developed?
Yes, it would.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I just think it's important we're investing the time and the resources to look at these issues in a comprehensive plan. That makes the most sense to me, that's where we need to do it, and make sure that everyone has a fair shake in all of these issues.
Makes sense. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, it carries. Thank you. Do you want to move on to the public hearing portion now?
Yes.
We have pictures for this on the screens.
We have the zoning ordinance and then also the zoning map. And I do have 2 packets of the hard copies of the zoning maps of the individual townships. If you're interested in reviewing those, sometimes it's a little bit easier to see them.
Yeah, could I have one?
Yeah.
Would you mind? Thank you, Mandy. Appreciate that. You see these?
It's fine.
You can point out what I should.
Do you have a preference of how I present? We can either go section by section or just a general overview highlighting the significant changes within the ordinance.
I suppose, number 2, yeah, I suppose we should call a public hearing to order, first of all. We are here to have a hearing for the shoreland management ordinance amendments, which are in the packet. So, Commissioner Drantle, did you indicate the second option to Ms. Landcamer?
I think the highlights rather than the
Right.
grammar and structure corrections would be more appropriate.
All right.
Yes, there are significant changes in the numbering. It may look like there's a lot of changes in the ordinance overall due to the red strikeouts or underlining, but it was more to bring it in line formatting wise with the zoning ordinance, just some small changes here and there with it. So it's not very many, but do want to just mention that we did add and amended 9 of the definitions. And a lot of these suggestions are coming from the model shoreland ordinance from the DNR that has available for us to review. So we did incorporate quite a few of those. It doesn't mean any change to the content of the ordinance, it's just a different way of stating with it. So we're looking for more consistency with a lot of these changes. I do want to mention specifically Section 3 and Section 4. Section 4 and Section 5 are where we had the significant changes. Section 4 was related to the zoning map. And within your packet, it may look like there are, like I said, several changes within this section. But what we were able to do is sit down with our DNR regional hydrologist and verify the water bodies that are considered protected waters and what was represented on the current county shoreline map with it. So we were able to narrow down several of the areas, even take them off the list. For some reason, there were some water bodies that were on the map that weren't even on the list. So you won't see those changes.
Commissioner Kemp?
I just need to interrupt to make sure that I'm on the same page you are. We're talking about Section 4, Shoreland Classification System and Land Use
Correct.
District, is that correct?
Correct.
Page 15, right?
Well, in your scroll up, it should be something other than 15. I think it's gonna show 15 at the printed, but your digital is gonna be page 40. So I just wanted to make sure I was with you. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry.
So those changes, there's just a couple of sections added, but most of the changes actually occurred on the map itself. We did receive 66 comments, whether they were a phone call, a walk-in, or by email. We sent over 300, just under 400 letters out to all the affected landowners. I'd say an overwhelming large majority of the landowners, the shoreline was actually being reduced. There were some that did, it increased on the shoreline, the county shoreline map, but not on the protected waters map with it. So there was some concern as far as what did that mean to them in regard to building, how is their septic system impacted by those type of changes with it. And we did note too with every individual that came in or we spoke to is that although the county shoreline map did not reflect it, they've always been shoreline based on the DNR protected waters map with it. So there really wasn't a change. It was more of a change on the county's map, but DNR had it already classified as shoreline with it. So that's where on section 4 we'll have those significant changes on the zoning map itself. If we go into section 5, and that is where the permitted and conditional uses are identified. The next big thing was the changing of the single-family dwellings from a conditional use permit to a permitted use. And that was why it was suggested to have it as a conditional use permit. We have no idea why. We talked with the DNR, they could not provide us a reason why. We currently have about maybe 1 shoreline dwelling a year. DNR doesn't comment or provide any feedback to us, and basically it was about a 1.5 month delay for the landowner to get their permit for construction with it. So this is definitely a benefit for the landowner to move forward with it. We did have one in April, and they opted to go through the process because they wanted to start construction rather than wait till this was completed. But they were well aware that they had the opportunity to wait with it. So that's going to be the biggest change within the permitted uses. Seasonal produce stands and timber harvesting were also added. Both of them meet the standards of the shoreline ordinance and shoreline rules. As far as conditional use permits, there were some changes that we had to incorporate by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for feedlots. Although it wasn't listed within the county shoreline ordinance, it was in a state MPCA rule, and so we had to incorporate with that. The county doesn't have any flexibility whether or not we enforce it. It has to be enforced with it. So there was some discussion at the meeting with a couple of the feedlot producers, how that impacted their feedlots and future construction plans. And then we just made some small changes of rewording some of the items to be consistent with the zoning ordinance with it. As far as that, that's basically the significant changes. There's some areas that we did incorporate some model language, but again, it does not really change the interpretation. It's just the wording of the type of use with it. We did have a couple of comments at the meeting itself from public. And just want to highlight those because I think those were consistent with the feedback that we did hear from individuals just regarding the shoreline zoning in general. We heard from Andrew Olmanson. He lives just outside of St. Peter. He was one of the individuals that benefited from the reduction of the shoreline on the zoning map. And then we heard from Scott Rudnick and Taylor Rudnick. Their areas, they have a wetland that's east of their home, and for some reason it's actually shaped like a candy cane. The cane part of itself was not reflected on the county shoreline map, but it was on the DNR map, so they're having to consider some of their situations for future building with it, but they are aware of that now. And they did speak a couple different times that night. We did hear from Tim Wabble, had concerns about the septic system rules within the shoreline and how the state rules and the county rules are at times difficult for individuals for their construction projects, and how do you address those when they don't meet the setbacks. And then Pam and Ron Gromish both expressed concern about future expansion of their feedlot. One thing to note, they are currently in shoreland, and if you have an existing feedlot within shoreland, you're allowed to expand up to 999 animal units. So there is some flexibility for those existing facilities, but they do not allow the expansion beyond 1,000 animal units. So there is some type of threshold in place for that. So those were the changes. Like I said, most of the changes within the ordinance itself are more grammatical, formatting issues, that they're more in line with the zoning ordinance. Section 4 and Section 5 have the most significant, and Section 4 is related to the zoning map itself. I'll answer any questions you may have.
All right, well, thank you for your presentation. This is a public hearing. The county board will listen to and hear your remarks regarding our changes that are being forwarded by the Planning Commission. Anyone here to speak to the issue? Commissioner Lipke, did you ask?
Of your 66 questions or comments, did the majority of them seem satisfied after you explained things to them?
Yes, they were happy to know that what was reflected on the county map was actually being reduced to be in line with the state DNR map.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Kemp?
Mandy, what of these issues that we're resolving with this amendment now will be reviewed or become potentially an issue as part of our overall comprehensive plan? Or don't you see much change in that?
We don't see any changes with it. This has kind of been a process, probably the last 2 years. It became apparent to us when we were reviewing the county shoreline map in reference to the buffer map and saw some inconsistencies with that. So the protected waters map, that will not change as a result of the buffer map nor the comp plan. Comp plan with DNR has it in place, and that's what we have to deal with.
Sure, thank you.
To follow up on Commissioner Kemp's question, do you see that this document puts Nicollet County in a better place and its residents who wish to make building progress in a better place going forward?
It does. There are some ditches that on the current zoning map were considered shoreland, and so it was difficult for individuals to understand why. And now they know that rather than having to purchase 10 acres, they can purchase 3.5 acres, potentially, because most of the areas went from shoreland to agricultural zoning.
Commissioner Drantle, you were part of the discussion. How do you feel about the direction now?
I think it's a nice cleanup of the ordinance. It matches and meshes with the DNR maps a little bit better.
Mm.
Again, we're losing shoreline designation from a DNR perspective. It's mainly technical corrections.
Any other public testimony for this public hearing? I'll now close the public hearing and entertain a motion or discussion by the board to take action. If we do take action, what is your recommendation?
To adopt the shoreland ordinance amendments and the official zoning map amendment.
You've heard the request from Property Services Director. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Commissioner Drantle, Commissioner Kemp, any other discussion? Okay.
And just a clarification, that's in resolution form. in the
Correct.
packet.
Yep.
So you're adopting the resolution. It's in the
Correct.
packet.
Oh, okay.
Any other comments to the motion before us? Madam Attorney, have you been through this road here? Are you seeing everything clearly?
Myself, as well as Ms. Godet Coriel, was at the public hearing and been going over the drafts, yes.
Okay, very good. Any other comments? Let's call the roll.
Drantle?
Yes.
Kemp?
Yes.
Lippke?
Yes.
Fuller?
Yes, it carries. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mandy.
Public Works, good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. Several items from Public Works today. The first being to give the board a County Road 12 flooding update. Since our last regular county board meeting in May, we had, based on favorable, warm, dry weather, opened the road, and then we had to close again on June 2nd. And as of yesterday, June 11th, County Road 12 has approximately 10 inches of water at the center line of the road. Since our last meeting, I've had several conversations, email conversations with the DNR, and also met with our lead ditch viewer regarding the potential process for getting an outlet into County Ditch 38A if we look at possibly pumping water. So, recapping my conversations with the DNR, it revolved around permitting to be able to pump water. They said that if we're going to pump water, we would be applying for a temporary water appropriations permit. As part of that permit application, we would have several things that they would like to see submitted. It wasn't an all-inclusive list, but it was at least a list of items that they, at this time, thought that they would need to be able to issue a permit. They would need to know the point of taking, so where in the basin would you be drawing the water out, and then the point of discharge, where would that water be discharged at. They want to know the size and length of any discharge pipes. They also want to know what elevation would the basin be drawn down to. They would want to know the pumping flow rate. They also want to see written approvals from landowners who may have discharge pipes crossing their property, or flow crossing their property, or any equipment that may sit on private property. They also want to see a determination if the receiving body can handle the extra flow. will not damage downstream property, cause erosion, and downstream sedimentation. After they received that information, they weren't sure if there may be other considerations or requirements that they may need to see. Items may come up as they review this information. Basically, these items would be the same if you go to County Ditch 38A or if you're looking at running the water to a private ravine, possibly off to the southwest. The DNR would want to see all these same types of information. Another part of the permitting process is the Wetland Conservation Act, which is administered by Bowser and the local government agency. There's been an email where Bowser has been expressing concerns that temporary pumping would not meet the no loss provision, where wetland replacement would not be necessary. There's certain things that you can do to wetlands that under the WACA law and rules that you'd be considered a no loss type of activity, which wouldn't require replacement of wetland. Drying this basin down, there may be impacts to wetlands, which if there's a no exemption exists, the county could potentially be on the hook for replacing wetlands that have been impacted by the drawdown. That will have to be further investigated if changes in the water elevation are looked at out there. They did say that if you pumped, the no loss there may be an exemption for it if the DNR has committed to managing the wetland for duck habitat. The other conversations that I've had was with our lead ditch viewer, Mark Behrens. He's been the lead viewer for the Freeborn County viewers and has done several viewings and redeterminations throughout the county. That group has done the redeterminations of benefits for County Ditch 38A and 83, so he's familiar with this area. To run water to the ditch system, and since this basin has no natural outlet and is not included in any drainage system, there is a statute, Minnesota Statute 103E.401, use of a drainage system as an outlet that would govern water going to a ditch system. The law requires that a landowner, in this case, it could be potentially be the drainage, the county itself, petitioning itself, so to speak. The drainage authority must be petitioned for the outlet. A hearing has to be scheduled. More than likely, engineer and viewers have to be hired. Engineers would have to determine the capacity of the outlet drainage system. You'd have to determine if the additional water that you're going to put into the system, if that existing system has the capacity to handle that additional water. The viewers would determine the properties benefited by the outlet. Properties beside the road right-of-way would most likely be included. Outlet fee would need to be set, and they thought in the cases they've set outlet fees in other ditch systems that the outlet fee could potentially be substantial. More than likely, properties beside the road right-of-way would also be paying for pumping in their estimation. The county attorney has had some discussion with Kurt Dieter, and he echoes the same items as Mark Behrens has regarding going to the ditch system. So some final thoughts and considerations I'll throw out there, and then we can open up for questions and comments. We have gotten rough quotes for doing pumping. Pumping is an expensive proposition that doesn't necessarily yield a permanent solution. And as we've seen with the continued rainfall, can we really get ahead with drying the basin down by pumping? And as we've seen, like I said, basin has risen almost over a foot in the last 10 days. Also, should county taxpayers have to pay 100% to pump water when road right-of-way comprises a very small amount of the total acres in the basin? There was, in the early 70s, an actual ditch system proposed to drain over 2,000 acres in this area. There is a sub-watershed within that watershed area that includes the Kister Pond area, and it's comprised of about 810 acres. Based upon the old ditch system plan that wasn't built, it was shot down, I believe, by the DNR and environmental groups, that of this 810 acres, only 11 acres is road right-of-way. And so that's only 1.36% of this area is road right-of-way that actually contributes water to this basin. And so I think to a certain point, if we're going to move water out of the basin, you're talking fairness issues. Should the taxpayers pay all the cost to move water out of the basin where the public road system only contributes 1.36% of that land area? Something else we got to remember too is pumping or installing even a tile line will send water to an area that has never received this water before, as this basin is a basin that has no natural outlet. If anything is done regarding these two potential solutions, temporary solutions, the county will need to make sure all the I's are dotted and T's crossed to make sure future liabilities are minimized. Also, following discussion of County Road 12, there is a following agenda item that is asking the county board to approve consulting contracts to start and complete reconstruction plans and specifications for approximately 2.5 mile segment of County Road 12, which would include the Kister Slough area. The project is planned to start construction May of 2020. This would be a permanent solution to the flooding issue on the road. That's my report up to this point.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. We appreciate your report. There's a lot to get to there. Commissioners, do you have any response to what you're hearing here today?
Well, I have like 4 questions, I guess. What's the chance of just pouring some rock on the edges and putting gravel in there as a temporary solution?
I don't think that would work very well
Well, they did it the other time.
Well, it took a significant amount of rock that was dumped off the sides of the road to build a foundation. Yeah, I mean, you have to be much wider at the base to get to an eventual top. And where, as we see in the basin, rose over a foot in 10 days, how high do you actually build? And then if we're going to do the permanent solution, a permanent reconstruction through there, that may be money just wasted.
But it would open the road shortly instead of waiting.
We would still
years.
need to go through the permitting process with the DNR and all of that.
Just to dump some rock and put some
Yes.
gravel in.
Yep. There's no getting around the DNR and the wetland laws that you have to work within.
So I guess this is a question for the county attorney. Sounds like there's some objections to even thinking about pumping to 38. If there was a hearing, you wouldn't need a whole lot of objections to get that canceled. Is that correct?
Well, if you were going to pump it into another system, there would be the outlet petition that would be filed, and then there would be a hearing for the board to determine whether it has the capacity to accept that water.
Okay.
And that's where the engineering report would come in and public comment would come in about whether that system is going to be able to handle that.
Right.
And then there's the corresponding cost
Yes.
that would have to be assessed to the lands that are being benefited by that outlet.
Well, for the short term, it isn't going to benefit those landowners at all because their crop is underwater now for this year.
Well, the land, they wouldn't look at that just this year. They would look at what's the overall benefit to that land.
Right,
And
but-
then the question would become as well is this going to be a one-time event, or is there going to be an ongoing outlet fee assessed.
I
to
don't
that
think
land.
anybody looked at pumping as a permanent solution. Pretty well correct on that, aren't I, Seth? We took a road trip and went and visited the landowner, one of those creek crossings on the creek it would go into. An idea I suggested to him is if we'd have an 8-inch tile, which according to some formula I got, an 8-inch tile at 2% slope would take out 40 acres of an inch of water a day. So in 3 days, you could lower that basin an inch. And what I suggested to him is if we would have some kind of a control structure that would test the height of the creek, and if the water was rising, would actually electronically shut off a gate at the head of the water. He didn't say no, but he didn't say yes either. But it did pique his interest, and the water we saw flowing through there yesterday, an 8-inch tile would be a really small percentage of the water we saw, which was probably a quarter of the water that was there going through that crossing on Saturday when it went under. Kind of just looking over the landscape, maybe a tile all the way to Minnesota would be a possibility, but there's some steep hills to go down, and that's probably not a good thing.
Well, and it's also gonna be very expensive.
Very far.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
arguably, it's gonna be very expensive for the adjacent property owners.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we're creating a new drainage system. Correct me if I'm misunderstanding that, but from everything that we've been reading and everything we've talked about is we are indeed establishing a new drainage system to one way, shape, or form. And so ultimately, is it gonna be the adjacent property owners that are gonna bear that cost? And also, is that also not a DNR portion of that property is owned by them also? Is that correct? Am I making that assumption, or?
You're correct.
I think it's a correct assumption.
Okay.
And even putting a tile line in, you're gonna be bound by permitting by the DNR, and they may
Exactly,
take,
and-
they may take a whole different view on a tile line as being a permanent type of installation.
Right.
And the permit requirements may be completely, or there may be more requirements from them on getting a permit. You probably
we
won't
aren't
be
gonna
getting
know
a
that until
temporary
we
water
attempt that, right.
appropriations permit, and
Right.
now you're almost talking what the DNR has proposed before is potentially managing the wetland for better duck habitat, and their plan would be to install a tile and a structure to regulate that flow.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, but at the same time, that might be years and years off with the DNR, which we'll get more information on next week, hopefully.
Yeah, it may be years and years off before you get the permitting to install a tile to do this.
Okay, and would we need 26% of the property owners in that basin to initiate a petition?
For a new drainage system?
Yeah.
Yes, so you'd have to go through the formal permitting process. The outlet to petition would not require the 26%, but to establish a new system, yes.
Well, that would be a new system, right?
Yes, this would be a new, you'd need the 26% for a new system, but if you're gonna do the outlet that we talked about, you would not need the 26%.
Oh. So wouldn't now be the time to initiate that if this is gonna be a long process, and if we get denied, we get denied?
Well, you'd have to tell me to initiate that petition, but I think there's opposition to the water going into 38A.
No, I'm not talking about 38. I'm talking about going to the stream that Seth was talking
But
about.
that's considered a private ditch.
That's a different, that would be a different process, because the creek is not would not be the outlet process that I talked about earlier.
Right.
Those are
Mr. Crush?
3 different options.
One thing to consider that with that, Commissioner Lipke, is that that process would be very lengthy, even if you started today. And we would probably be talking an 18-month process.
For the outletting?
No, to initiate a new ditch system.
Oh, yes, that process would be very long.
So we would be almost to 2020,
We're on top
which
of it
we're
either
gonna
way.
be redoing the road at that point. So it would be a lot of work for potentially nothing, because we would almost be to the point where the road's gonna be redone.
Corresponding point to that is if we would have started this a year ago, we'd be further along in the system.
Where do we push the money in now, Jeff?
Getting back to Commissioner Lipke's first point, there's no way to dam this and open up the road on both sides.
No, if it was dry on one side and you had water flow just running one way, maybe you could investigate a potential dike on one side, but you're sitting in the low point of the road with water on both sides.
And then I'm just a little bit unclear, maybe you said it, but maybe I couldn't hear it. What is the DNR's, do they manage this yet, or do they don't manage it as a
No, the basin isn't managed from the beginning
not
of
managed
time.
at all.
It's a closed basin. It has no natural outlet. And I was able to get my hands on the boring reports from Xcel Energy when they upgraded their line through there, and there was a boring taken real close to County Road 12 because they have a new structure that they built there. And what you find is the bottom of this basin has some real dense, impermeable, let's call it wetland junk or whatever you want to call it, that does not allow water to go through it. And so basically we're looking at a perched wetland. So the only way the water goes out is up through the air. There's no natural infiltration through the bottom of this area.
Classic pothole.
Big pothole.
So, Mr. Chair, my question relates to, so if we go ahead and do this reconstruction, who's to say 10 years down the road you're not gonna have the problem again? I mean, the water's not,
As part of the reconstruction, as part of the surveying work that will be done, we will try to identify the natural runout elevation of the basin. We will build above the natural runout elevation.
wow, that could get expensive.
None of these are gonna be cheap either way.
The reconstruction of the road, it appears that this would be the gives us the best chance of success with the least future liabilities to the general taxpayer. County Road 12 is on our radar, has been on our radar for reconstruction, and has been identified in our long-range plan when we adopted that as part of the sales tax that was implemented this year. Been holding off on full reconstruction of County Road 12 because the pavement is in somewhat decent shape. With the issue here now has accelerated the schedule for County Road 12. It has very narrow shoulders, steep inslopes. It's a prime candidate for a reconstruction project. It's just having to be moved up sooner than later.
Does the DNR have permitting along with the reconstruction process also?
Yes, there will be permitting from the DNR, the Corps, and through WACA. Now with a road reconstruction project, there is no loss exemptions for that project because there is the road wetland replacement bank program. And so wetlands that are impacted as part of the road reconstruction project, you can apply and receive those credits to take care of any damage or elimination of wetlands along with that project. So we deal with that type of permitting on every road reconstruction project, and it goes fairly smoothly.
I saw a hand go up. Mr. Halke, did you have a question? Would you like to stand up and address it from there?
Sure.
Speak loud enough.
Okay. You heard Seth go through 15, 20 minutes of permits needed to lower the water. My question still is, why weren't any permits needed to drain into that? I just do not understand that. That is raising the water, and I agree somewhat with Mr. Comerford as far as the surrounding swampland, you know, adding to it, but the drainage into that pond is raising it. And when you drain, it's like pouring a cup of water into a bowl. There's no way to empty it. Now you start pouring 2 cups in and 3 cups in, yeah, pretty soon the bowl runs over, and that's exactly what's happening here. Waiting for it to evaporate, oh my God, this is not gonna work. So, my point is, and maybe John, I know it would cost a lot, we just wanna see the road open. Whatever those people wanna do with their drainage system is fine, but I just want that road open so we can get emergency services, Brighton Township and northern part of Portland Township.
Thank you, Mr. Hulkey. Seth, can you answer his point or give any?
You know,
More on that.
I'm not versed on the permitting for private tile drainage. I mean, I was at the same meeting where the DNR and SWCD said there's no rules or laws on the books that would prevent those landowners from draining in there. And if that's true or not, I do not know.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner?
One concern I have too is if we get a lot of heavy rains, eventually that water will find its way to that same stream. I think it'll go south.
Yes, but the road will be open with the reconstruction project.
Okay, but I mean, that would be a massive erosion thing if that decided to meander its way to that stream. It's also a concern.
Are we talking about reconstruction or a bridge?
Reconstruction.
Bridge might be cheaper.
Maybe.
No.
Not-
No, not for that
Not
length.
for that span.
No.
Be at least 600 feet.
Mr. Hulkey?
I just have one quick point, and I know Seth has said this before. It's gotta be lowered to rebuild it, right, Seth?
No, we can build through it.
Oh.
Even if it's dropped 2 feet down, we still have to build through water, which is a bit of a challenge.
Okay, I misunderstood you, because I thought earlier, at an earlier meeting, you said it would have to be lowered to reconstruct.
Oh, lower water would help. I mean, we'd have to put less material in and save a little bit of cost, but it's still a sizable process just to build through the water.
Well, it seems like we've had our flooding update on County Road 12. Let's move along to your next item, which is proposed reconstruction, if that pleases the board.
We need to look at the numbers. Let's move on.
Ready to move on?
Please.
At our May board workshop, we discussed a couple projects for upcoming reconstruction projects, and the consensus at that meeting was to move forward with soliciting consultant contracts to get them on board to start design of plans and specifications to bring these projects forward for construction. And so the first one is to consider consultant contracts for County Road 12 reconstruction. The reconstruction of County Road 12 would be from the realignment or future realignment of County Road 12 as part of the Trunk Highway 14 bypass around the city of Cortland to just north of the County Road 12, County Road 20 intersection. And this has been determined as a priority project. Develop the right-of-way plat, specification, construction plan. Several consultant firms will be needed. The following firms will be hired if approved by the county board to do the following work. Stonebrook Engineering to develop plans and specifications for $343,686.50. Bolton and Mink to develop the right-of-way plat and monument those corners, approximately $26,000. There will probably be several other smaller consultant contracts that don't rise to the level of needing to come before the board, but we will have to hire probably ISG to do a wetland delineation to identify all the wetlands along the project. And so I'm asking the board today to approve these two proposal and contracts with Stonebrook and Bolton and Mink and authorize myself to sign those contracts and proposals. Within your packet are both contract proposals with detailed breakdown of the scope of work. And I'll just point out in Stonebrook's proposal, if you look down at the bottom, there will be a sub-consultant hired by Stonebrook to do the investigation of several wetland areas on this project. Braun Intertech will do a phase 1 initial borings through the Kister Slough area to determine what the soil types are through the wetland, because we will be, of course, raising the road and widening, and you're going to be putting material and fill on soils that have never seen that kind of pressure before. And when you do that, you will see settlement occur. And so as part of that boring, they will determine what process will be needed to build through that wetland. And off to the south, there's several other very wet areas that hold water that we're also going to investigate. Based on phase 1 investigation, if there's still some more additional information that appears that would be needed, a phase 2 would be undertaken by Braun Intertech. The hope is that a phase 2 investigation will not be needed, and so approximately $33,000 of Stonebrook's cost would automatically not come on and be needed.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion to that effect?
It's painful, but I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Kemp has moved that we proceed with this. Is there a second?
I will second with, I'd rather see us lower it though.
Discussion on the motion. So the question, you had mentioned it before, our half-cent sales tax is providing monies to be able to get projects finished that otherwise wouldn't have been helped by the state of Minnesota because they haven't lived up to their end of the bargain on that. This is where some of those monies would come from?
Potentially.
Potentially.
Yep.
Commissioner Kemp had
Michelle,
humorously
should have
observed
stains
at
in
our
the
recent AMC meeting that each of the 50 people who were there that day could take home 1 million gallons of water on their way and help us out of the situation.
And they were
They
reticent
didn't
to
do
do that.
Well, I offered that we put a big sprinkler in Commissioner Lipke's front yard and we could water his grass for a while.
But the point was, and Denny, correct me if I missed all of your humor that day, but he had made the observation that somewhere, some place back in the 50s, 60s, when this road was built, we decided to build it through, the county decided to build it through a slough. I thought about it and I smirked at the suggestion, but that has been done in various places throughout the state of Minnesota.
And it's on a section line.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
It's on a section.
that's how it got built and how those dots were connected. But to the best of my investigation, albeit limited, the adjacent properties and how we did things at that time were different. I mean, they truly were different, and we've changed how we're doing the land use, we've changed how much tiling we're doing. All of those things have compounded to create the situation. I'm sorry that some individuals are limited in their access to that roadway, but I think we have an obligation to make sure that the citizens, that all of the citizens that are paying the bill, or at least have a direct impact in improving the roads so we have a long-term solution to a problem that has been slow in coming, but suddenly is at our door. So that's kind of where I'm supporting this for that reason.
Commissioner Dranto?
So why don't we move the road?
Wouldn't be straight.
Well, you got wetland that goes quite a
wetland
ways
everywhere
east
out
and
there.
west, and then
Yeah.
we're buying new property and building on new grade, which would more than likely would be more expensive than staying on our current alignment.
Because I think this problem's gonna be around forever.
Yep.
It will, but we'll build above the outlets, the natural outlets, so probably the long-term concern after the road is raised is planning for a new ditch system. Because assuming that continues to raise in height, a new ditch system will have to go to the southwest, I assume. Otherwise, it'll be just overland flooding at some point.
Should, since that issue is raised, should that be coincidental timing on that whole thing?
Well, like I said
Building.
earlier in my report, that a ditch system was designed and
Uh-huh.
developed and petitioned for, and then it did not make it through the approval process. But that system would have drained the Kister Slough, it appears, completely, among other wet spots throughout that entire 2,000-some acre watershed.
Can we count on the DNR for not allowing it back then to help us with the funding this time?
Possibly.
I mean, they might want to partner.
Well, as part of getting the design going on this project, there is a fund out there called the State Park Road Account, and it's a certain percentage that comes out of the total transportation funds that are distributed in the state and given to the DNR to award projects, and it can be township roads, county roads, city roads that provide access to DNR or parklands. Now, County Road 12 does provide access to DNR wildlife management area, and so getting the design going here will give us an idea of cost to build through this area, and I intend to then submit an application to try to receive a portion of the funds to cover a part of this project. Now, the funds available won't cover the entire project, probably not even half, but it would be a chunk of money potentially that we could receive for this project. And the DNR has been, they would write a letter of support to them. It's basically a letter of support for us to themselves.
Right. So, but in the end, if we do raise this, build this road, there will still need to be an outlet
At some point. At some
at some point.
Someday.
Assuming the water will continue to
But
rise.
the theory is that we are raising the road surface high enough that if the slough as we know it continues to climb, it will find its own natural outlet before it impacts the road surface again. Is that as
would be
simple
the
as I can make it?
that would be the intent. Yep. And the DNR is still discussing, along with Ducks Unlimited, of still potentially managing this area. And then Joe Stengel will be at our board workshop next week, and maybe can give a more detailed update. But when I last contacted him, he didn't have much for detail on that process, other than it appeared that the funding to do the surveying and feasibility study would be coming from Ducks Unlimited, and they're currently prioritizing their upcoming survey projects that they want to do. So there is still discussion about them managing that, and if they're actually able to manage it and install a structure that sets the water level at a certain level, we can adjust our plans if we haven't actually done the construction of the road yet and lower it possibly.
But the core information we're gathering from this initial design is gonna be used regardless. I mean, nothing is gonna be discarded.
Nope.
The point is that we need to move forward if we're gonna meet a timeline that's as timely as we can make it based on the construction seasons and the dollars available.
Yep.
Is that correct?
Yep.
I
So
saw a
we-
hand go up, I'm sorry.
Yes, that's fine. No, that's fine. Thank you, Seth. We're in the midst of the conversation. Would you like to add your voice to it?
How deep is the water now along the road, do you know?
It's about 10 inches deep at the center line.
In the
Adjacent?
slough, not on the road.
I don't know. There hasn't been a survey done of the exact bottom of that wetland.
I was told it was some 22 feet deep or something off the edge of the road.
I haven't seen anything to
I
confirm
hadn't heard that. Have you heard that?
It's pretty deep. Well, it's, probably 6 feet higher than it was a few years ago.
So, when the DNR does come up with a plan, we'll build a road and it'll be 10 feet above the water level at some point, because they want Ducks Unlimited to be part of it, so they want it for duck habitat. Well, they don't want it all in water either. So, I don't know. This is all backwards.
I know Ducks Unlimited would like to lower it from this current point.
If we could have your name and address, please, and speak up.
Brent Crone. I know Ducks Unlimited would say that they would lower the pond if they can get management of it. So I agree with what we're saying over here. all we're doing by raising the road is we're addressing a symptom, we're not solving the problem. The problem is even if we raise the road, we still need an outlet. So if the thing's ultimately gonna be managing that road 10 foot above, why spend all this money to raise your road 10 feet? When at the end of the day, if you get the outlet, you're not gonna need it. And looking at this, if we're 2020 construction, you're not open until 2021, what's the DNR and Ducks Unlimited schedule? I mean, could we have this thing drained by that same time period? I don't know.
I don't know if we know the answer to that. Commissioner Lipke?
Yes. Seth, you said you still got the plans for when they were gonna put that ditch in. I actually think it was in the 60s. Now, if we would only take 4 feet of water off the top, we wouldn't have to go near as deep as what they were planning to do to drain the whole slough.
Some of those cuts on the old plan, they were going 20, maybe 20 plus feet deep to get through to the southwest.
So we'd probably have to
outlet.
go 10 feet.
Possibly, but it's still a significant cost to do that. And then it gets down to what is fair for the county taxpayer to pay on an installation of that system. And then who owns it from now until the end of time.
Okay.
The DNR, to manage that, they're going to be looking for the same type of sign-offs by all the landowners that a tile line or whatever covers and where the water is also flowing over. So the same requirements they're giving us that we need to provide to them to do a project on our behalf are the same ones that they're going to have to get to do their project. And quite frankly, if I was a landowner taking water that's never ever come my way, I probably wouldn't want it. I mean, that's what we're all up against, is we're sending water where it's never ever gone before.
But I'm getting a call every day. People want a quick fix, and you're getting more than a call every day, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, it impacts everybody. I mean, our operation included, we use County Road 12 on a regular basis to haul tons of gravel throughout the county.
Right. It would be a service to our taxpayers if we could get it open.
The motion is still under consideration and debate. Mr. Crone, could you repeat your comment again?
Well, just by raising this road, we're solving the symptom. The problem is that the water level is rising because there's no drainage. So raising the road is addressing a symptom. Solving the problem is getting drainage to that basin, which, like we talked earlier, if this thing keeps rising and rising and rising, eventually it's gonna find a natural outlet. Well, the DNR needs an outlet if they're gonna manage it. If it finds a natural outlet, that's an outlet. I mean, that's the real problem, is that this pond needs an outlet. Raising the road is just addressing the symptom. And I think it's gonna keep, I mean, do we have records for what was done to this road in the 90s? I know it's raised once, if not twice, in the 90s.
There's no records.
No records of that according to our engineer.
Larry, it was raised twice, wasn't it?
What?
The road was raised twice, wasn't it?
I didn't-
The road was raised twice?
I don't know. I know Irvin Smith used to farm right up to the slough, and then it got too wet, and then the willows grew, and then it got too wet and the willows died. But, is it only the DNR that stands in the way of us of putting a 6-inch tile?
Well, and the adjacent property owners.
Huh?
The adjacent property owners
Well,
for
yeah,
the
but
private
you
ditch.
talked to most of them, didn't you, yesterday, or?
We tried to, but it's a management issue, and then we're back to the issue of
Yeah,
cost and
but I don't-
ultimately the control issue.
I don't think any of them have a problem with a 6-inch tile, like you said, that would only be what, 10th of what was going on?
I think we discussed 8 inch.
8-inch would we need to do anything, basically.
But I mean, how do we put pressure on the DNR? Is that impossible? I know they've got land next to my place, and people told me the DNR stands for do nothing right, and I believe it. But how do we put pressure on them? We gotta talk to our legislators, or does that do any good? I talked to Clark Johnson, of course, he's a lame duck, and I guess you got one too. I think you're more like a totally handicapped duck, the way it looks. But,
Well,
help to talk to those people.
Clark is the same as ours.
What?
Clark is all
All
of
of
the
Nicollet County.
All of Nicollet.
I know that, yeah. But I mean, he is a lame duck.
I asked Clark to try and find out if other counties have done something with a similar circumstance, and he has not gotten back to me about that yet. But he's in communication with other people here too.
Back to the matter at hand, this engineering contract is whether the road is raised or not, it's just reconstruction of the road.
Right. We're not gathering, correct me if I'm wrong, Seth, but we're not gathering data or looking for information that we would somehow abandon.
No.
The dollars here, because we still had in our long-range plan the rebuild of 12. We're still gonna need to know all of the data we're collecting under this contract.
Yeah.
The only variant that would be is if we were to find an outlet for this system, it may change the height of the reconstruction, but in essence, the core data we're gathering is gonna be the same. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Well, I think it's time that we decide on the motion. And let me just say this. For you to be able to get this information back to us this quickly is a testament to your hard work, and we appreciate that. So would you please repeat the motion before we call the question?
Motion by Commissioner Kemp, seconded by Commissioner Lipke to approve the proposals contract with Stoneberg Engineering and Bolton Bank and authorize Public Works Director to sign the contracts proposals.
That totals about 390, is that with all said and done?
369.
369?
370.
All right, call the roll, please.
Kemp?
Yes.
Lipke?
Yes.
Rental?
Yes.
Kohler?
Yes, it carries. We'll move ahead on that project.
Yes.
County Road 15?
Yes, the next item is to consider consultant contracts for County Road 15 reconstruction. This would be the reconstruction of County Road 15 from Trunk Highway 111 to County Road 51, and this has been determined to be a priority. Just like County Road 12, this work would be to develop the right-of-way plat, specification, construction plans, and several consultant firms will be needed to be hired to deliver that. The following firms would be hired, if approved by the county board, to do the following work. Again, Stonebrook Engineering to develop plans and specifications for approximately $330,000. Bolton and Mink for the right-of-way plat and monumentation, which is about $67,000. Like I said in the County Road 12 discussion, some additional consultant contracts will be needed to do wetland delineation as one example. Can't really award that proposal yet because we need some general construction limits of what actually will the project be touching, so they have an idea of an area to look for and identify those wetlands. So I'm asking the board today to approve those proposals and contracts with Stonebrook and then Bolton and Mink and authorize myself to sign those contracts.
You've heard the recommendation from the engineer. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Lipke, Commissioner Kemp, any comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Oops, I'm sorry.
Is this
John?
kind of where the schedule was on it anyway, or is it moved ahead a little
Yeah,
bit?
County Road 15's been on our schedule to work on for some time, but
Okay.
with the issue coming up with County Road 12, we're gonna slip that one in and move County Road 15 back. County Road 15 will be a significant cost, 12 to 15 million approximately. We'll take some working with Ryan and the finance department exactly how we fund that, but at least getting going on this process gets us plans and specifications in place. This road has the potential to be submitted possibly as a local road improvement project, which is usually funded by the state legislature using highway bonds. So it's tough to make those applications if you don't have a defined plan and a construction year potentially identified. So getting going with this design work will help us be able to make those type of applications in the future.
Any other comments to the motion in front of us? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. I'm going to ask Commissioner Kemp to take the next item. I need to step aside.
And the next item was striping.
Yep, consider advertising for our 2018 striping project. The 2018 striping project is our annual contract to restripe a portion of the paved county roads. We're looking at approximately $155,000 worth of restriping. In my budget, striping, gravel crushing, crack sealant is all kind of a one lump sum item. I have targets, what I kind of want to spend to each one of those categories, but depending on need, when we actually get into the year, I may adjust those up and down. So potentially, what's left in that budget item, it could be a little bit more, 155,000, or it could be a little bit less. Depends too on how bids come in. So I'm asking today the board to authorize advertising for the 2018 striping project and set a bid opening date of July 16th, 2018 at 11 o'clock at our Public Works facility.
Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The next item for the board's consideration is to consider advertising for our 2018 aggregate materials contract. The 2018 aggregate materials is the crushing and stockpiling of our Class 5 modified gravel that will be used to maintain our gravel surfacing on our gravel county roads. It'll also be used to re-shoulder our roads. We will also include screening a pile of clean sand for snow, winter snow and ice maintenance operations. Approximately going to spend $105,000 towards that. Asking the board to authorize advertising for 2018 aggregate materials and set a bid opening date of July 16th, 2018 at 11:30 a.m. at Public Works.
I'll move.
We have a motion.
Aren't we doing this a little late in the year?
This is about exactly the
right?
same
Okay.
time last year.
All
Yep.
right.
I'm still waiting for a second.
Oh, I'll second that, I'm sorry. I was just thinking we were a little late.
Any other
in the-
discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'll turn over the meeting back to Commissioner Kolars.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have any
Next.
item?
Next item for the board to consider is consider a quote for Lafayette shop roof replacement. In July 2017, the roof on the Lafayette Highway shop was severely damaged by hail. We had submitted a claim to MCIT, and they will provide up to just shy of $81,000. I requested 2 quotes for replacing the Lafayette shop roof. To make sure that if we were just that the quotes were reasonable. The quotes were received from Ferguson Construction, which is a chief building contractor, for $67,672. We received from Ghost Switch Construction, which they are the Butler building contractor for the area. They submitted a quote of $59,650. Overall, the Lafayette shop is a chief building and was originally built by Ferguson Construction. I would recommend that we replace a chief roof on a chief structure with a chief roof again.
You've heard the recommendation from
I'll
the
move.
county engineers. There a motion to that effect?
I'll move.
Second.
Lipke and Kemp, discussion?
It's hard to top that one.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, are you also asking for permission to sign any contracts that would be necessary as a result of accepting those?
Yes, I
quotes?
would be.
Did you have that,
This potato chips bag opening.
Lynette? Did you have that addition
What was
of the
it?
language?
That,
That I'd
Mr.
be authorized to sign the quote to do the work,
the contract.
contract.
Okay.
Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. Do you have anything else for us today?
I'm tired.
Tired.
Can I bother Seth once more?
Well, before you jump in, can I just have one? We do have construction going on. SMC is trying to do paving for us. The weather is not cooperating. Plus, SMC had a lot of carryover work from last year that they wanted to do in April this year. And of course, we know how April turned out, so they're behind on that work and trying to do some work for us. So they're here and then they're gone, and that's going to kind of continue on. But today they are paving again, putting the last lift on County Road 20. So we're making progress there. And I just got it this morning. Their anticipated plan is they're going to try to pave as much on County Road 20 today and tomorrow, and then they have to leave for another job. But what they do get done on 20, they're going to try to shoulder right away, but they will have to come back and finish the remaining portion of 20. They have the first lift on County Road 74, Sunrise Drive, up by our shop. They have to come back and put the final lift on that. And then they have left to do County Road 76, the small portion from 169 up to the old abandoned piece of 169, County Road 1 up by Lafayette, and County Road 14 is all on the docket yet. And then soon, on June 25th, the reconstruction of County Road 10 is anticipated to start, and C.S. McCrossin is the contractor for that project.
Have they been good to work with?
I've never have worked with them before.
I mean, have they, up to this point, they're keeping you informed and in the loop?
Yep. We had a pre-construction meeting last week, got some more information. We got some questions to go back and forth on, but plan is to start June 25th.
Perfect.
Yes. Now, was it my understanding between you two that if we even started now on a petition to lower that pond 4 feet, that it would be a year and a half probably until we could actually do something?
Through what process?
Of putting a tile to that stream to
That
the
is-
southwest.
So there's a couple, there's the outlet process where we would outlet it to 38A.
No, I'm not talking about.
No, so there's that process,
Yes.
that's the formal process. Putting it to the creek is that's a completely different, that's
Yes.
not the same outlet process. And that would have to go through the DNR for permitting and landowners. That's separate and apart from this outlet
Yes,
process.
yes.
And John, if it was a county ditch system, that's a whole process that I'm assuming is like an improvement process that we've seen take 18 months to 2 years.
I don't know that the outlet, if you were gonna outlet the 38A, for example, that
No.
would take as long because you don't have
Right.
to have all of the
Right.
percentage.
Right.
Yep.
But the piece that would probably take a while is getting the engineering study
Right.
to know whether it can absorb that capacity, and then you need the report from the viewer. So I don't think it would take quite as long as an improvement petition, but to go to a creek,
Yeah.
that's a whole different animal
Yeah.
than the outlet to 38A.
And that could take a year and a half to 2 years.
I would imagine you would find opposition from your landowners on that creek.
Well, my understanding is every one of them would have to sign
Correct.
on the dotted line.
Correct.
I've heard that from the DNR, I heard it from Seth.
And that's what I mean, Michelle, is not the 38. If we went to the
Correct.
southwest, that's basically a new county ditch.
Right.
And we'd have to go through the whole process for that, even if it's just tile, right?
It would just be a tile.
But it's still.
Well,
We'd never
own.
put a ditch in.
We'd have to look at how
Well-
you would structure that and
No.
how it would be, whether it'd be temporary, permanent, we'd have to be looking at that whole process. And then you would have to have, if we're looking at actually structuring it as a drainage system, then yes, then you would have to go through that entire 26% to have somebody come in and petition.
So if the landowners they would, it'd be their option to start a petition.
They
if
could,
Yeah.
Okay. But in a best case, it'd be a year and a half to 2 years.
absolutely.
Okay.
Based on what we've seen from just our improvement projects
Right.
that we've got on the table, that would be my best guess.
It would take a while.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, are other commissioners here, they are kind of in favor of just waiting for now instead of starting something like this?
I don't think we're in a position to start it because we're a minority in this.
Yeah.
The adjacent property owners would, in my mind, would be the ones that we can't generate 26%.
No, barely over
Right.
one. I think it
Exactly.
was.
What we were at 11% affected was the original report from the viewers. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, I think
Or
Or
maybe
was it
what-
1% of the total, of the
Yeah,
total
of
drainage? Yeah.
You know, the total,
Right.
with an old plan, and
Right.
I think Nate's still back here. The entire ditch system plan had a watershed acreage of a little over 2,000 acres, and then
Right.
within the big watershed, there's sub-watersheds, and for the sub-watershed that the Kister Pond sits in was about 810 or 807 acres. And of what we could estimate was road right-of-way through there amounted to a little less than 1.4%.
Right.
So,
4% of
you know,
the
in the
total.
scope of this whole discussion, we are a very small part
Right.
of this.
But our small part affects a lot of people and businesses.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
Yes, that's true. Anything else for Mr. Greenwood?
Oh, just information, I think that original one was gonna go actually past the next road to the east. It was gonna be open ditch for a mile
It wasn't
east.
past the-
Yep, this is branch 2 that went up to Kiska's
Okay.
Pond.
Yeah, and then it was gonna go further east with tile. And 3 farmers were against it and the DNR, and it got shot down. I was a little kid when it was going on.
I'm guessing if you didn't have the ditch systems in Nicollet County, most of Nicollet County would look like the whole Kister Slough area.
A lot of it would.
Yep.
Right. Some of mine does right now.
All right. Thank you, Seth, for your appearance
Thank you
today
very much.
and your
Thanks, Seth.
reporting. The chair will recess the board meeting, call the Drainage Authority meeting to order. Consent agenda.
And
So moved.
second.
Motion from Dranto, second from Kemp. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed carries. Did you have a report on the considered ditch repair reports?
That's part of the
That
consent.
was
That
part of
is
your
part of
consent.
consent.
Yes.
Yes, you do.
As for our motion, okay, we are back now in regular session of the Nicollet County Board. Administration.
Just a reminder, we have the County Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting Monday at 6:30. Our county assessor left packets, I believe, in your mailbox. We do have a lengthy agenda compared to normal. So try to maybe review that packet beforehand, but it looks like we'll have at least 5 items to address that night, so that's it.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Madam Attorney, anything on your side?
No, thank you.
Informational items from staff. Chair's report, Commissioner Dranto and I met the new 4-H person, Mr. Foley, last Monday on June 4th at Nicollet. Of course, folks attended the AMC District 7 meeting in Winthrop. I want to thank those who could make it. Had a nice opportunity to visit with the people who were running for office, Mary Jo and Todd, who said they've never been to such a lively district meeting throughout the state. So that felt good to hear about that. Our next meeting will be this fall in Waseca County. The Maple meeting was held on June 7th, and I'm going to be at the state audit meeting here in the building on Thursday. So, Commissioner Dranto?
Basically just the normal meetings. I took my junk to Lee Seward County rather than Nicollet County to have the recycling done because it fit my schedule and got a little bit of grief. And then later last Friday attended the Tri-County Solid Waste Board meeting, of which Commissioner Stenson was actually present. So, other than that, nothing.
Who are the LeSueur County reps there?
Dr. King and Mr. Rolfing.
Okay.
That's right, he's a doctor.
Commissioner Kemp?
Again, attended the usual and assigned meetings. I was unable to attend the multi-county HRA as I did accept the invitation and spent a day in DC. That was very informative and learned a lot about the process. The District 7 meeting, and I continue to work with the various volunteers and board members for EMSRB, looking at trying to find a fiscal resolve for the ongoing issues there, which we also discussed at the District 7 meeting. So I thank everyone for their participation and input in that.
Will there, if I may, Denny, will there be a formal request?
Yes,
to
we're gonna.
each county?
Yes.
Is that being developed by
That
your
is
committee?
being developed. What we're trying to do is have a very focused strategic plan, and we've worked on a strategic plan that we want to make sure that all of the member counties sign in on. The biggest issue for funding for the organization has always been based on seatbelt dollars, on seatbelt turnback fee dollars. Unfortunately, as time has progressed and people are more efficient and more thoughtful, they're actually using their seatbelts, surprisingly. And it's kind of amazing. But the point is that those numbers have dwindled, and there's been no mechanism put in place for replacing those dollars to the regional projects. Unfortunately, the other item that was brought up and has failed twice in the legislature, no fault of anyone, was using the fee structure for potentially distracted driving. Unfortunately, much harder to convict, as our county attorney will
That's correct.
attest. And so that may or may not be a good approach for long-term sustained funding. When we're talking about sustained funding, we're not talking millions, we're talking a very small amount of money from the state coffers, but we also we feel it's important to not lose the momentum of the work that has been done, especially when it comes to providing medical direction for our regional ambulances, our EMS providers, including our sheriff's department, police departments, and other first responder groups in the 9-county region, which we think has the greatest impact on all of the citizens that they serve. So that's one of our focuses and why we're trying to keep it all going. So we will have a more comprehensive report and a direct request at that point. Thank you.
Commissioner Lipke?
Yes, I believe it was May 30th, went with Marie, and we attended the League of Women Voters, Steve Simon,
I forgot about that already.
Secretary of State.
Michelle was there also.
Michelle was there also. Went to the Greater Mankato Growth Legislative Update, May 31st. I went to Winthrop with the rest, with some of you. Spent a lot of time on the phone visiting with different people and things with County Road 12, and apparently nothing is accomplished.
Discussion.
Yeah, I had a lot of discussion, and I think there would have been more people in favor of pumping the ditch 38 if we wouldn't have had the 5-inch rain. Absolutely. Got a thistles complaint already, and I mentioned that Mr. Kemp and I took a 37-mile road tour yesterday, looking at ditches and creeks and getting my pickup completely muddy. So, thank you.
You got me completely muddy too, I'd point out. Completely different story.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Approval of commissioner meetings and conferences. Any, we did hear, were you going to make a comment?
Go ahead.
The state AMC in Bloomington, we heard at our meeting last Wednesday that as the AMC people are going around, the rooms are opening. Look at you.
Yeah, that was announced, I texted Lynette, she got booked. So.
Nice. Thank you for your work
December
on
we're
that.
talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, December. All right, Commissioner Grantel, I'm sorry to interrupt.
I did register for the ISG drainage gig on the 27th.
I think that's,
Okay.
That was a
we just-
Wednesday, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
And I'd like to go to that, but I'll be out of the country.
In June? All right, yeah.
And I will be at an AMC event in St. Paul that day, so I won't be able to join you.
I'll have fun.
That's a Wednesday, right?
Yes.
right.
Okay. Motion to approve.
I did have one question. Is anybody going to the NACO National?
I was planning on it, but it's not gonna work. You were planning on it, and you're busy too,
Yeah,
right?
I got a nephew that thought it was a good idea to get married, so that plans.
You have any plans, Debbie?
I'm committed, and I'm on a quick turnaround because we have a Alaskan cruise coming the end of July. So.
Good for you.
Yeah, this year it's in Nashville.
Nashville, right. So I was
Princess?
just, yes,
I've done that.
okay.
Motion to approve Commissioner Grantel's travels.
Move
I
it.
don't think I need one, I'm the only one going.
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay.
it's already approved.
All right. Forget about it. Approve per diems and expenses.
Move it.
Second?
Kemp, Lipke, discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed carries. Any other business come before the county board? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.
So which one of these things do I go in?